Continuing with the passé composé with both reflexive and non-reflexive verbs. So remember the two basic parts of the passé composé. It always starts with the auxiliary verb, either avoir or être, conjugated in the présent, depending on what verb it is that we're conjugating overall, followed by the past participle, which is either formed from the infinitive. So if it's an ER verb, drop the ER, add E accent aigu. If it's an IR verb, drop the IR, add an I. Or an RE verb, drop the RE and add a U. Or memorized if it's an irregular past participle. This is the standard format that we use for all verbs, whether they're reflexive or not. So for example, if we look at the sentence, nous avons mangé, we have eaten. We can see that our auxiliary verb here is avoir. The avons is the new conjugation of avoir in the present tense, followed by the past participle. Manger, the verb to eat, is an ER verb, so we dropped the ER and we added an E accent aigu. Nous avons mangé, we have eaten. Remember that nous is, of course, our subject pronoun. It's telling us who is doing the action of eating. We are. Our verb is that whole entire section, avons mangé. Even if it's two words, that's our verb. The auxiliary verb past the past plus the past participle is the passé composé verb. We must have both words. It does not do us any good to deconjugate this. The verb of this sentence is not manger, it's not to eat or eating. The verb is have eaten, avons mangé. So, question number 1. What is the verb of the following sentence? Vous avez étudié? Have you studied? Remember that the reflexive passé composé takes the exact same basic format. We have the auxiliary verb, which will always be être. All reflexive verbs will always take être. We will never see avoir here. The auxiliary verb, which is être, conjugated in the présent for whatever our subject pronoun was, plus the past participle, which is formed the exact same way it would normally be. ER verb, drop the ER, add E accent aigu. IR verb, drop the IR, add an I. RE verb, drop the RE, add a U. Or it's an irregular one we memorized. The only difference with the reflexive passé composé is that we have to include the reflexive pronoun in front of the whole entire thing. This is still considered part of the verb. Just like the se is part of the infinitive, it's still the part of the verb in all of the conjugations. However, the actual conjugation of se never changes based on tense. It's a pronoun, it's not actually a verb. So you don't have a past myself and a future myself, it's just myself. Me, te, se, nous, vous, ce. So if we look at another example, nous nous sommes habillés. So we have dressed ourselves. Our reflexive pronoun is nous, because that's our conjugation of se that matches nous. Our auxiliary verb is sommes, because that's how we conjugate être in the présent for our subject pronoun nous. And then finally, our past participle habillé. Habillé is an irregular ER verb, so we dropped the ER, we added an E accent aigu. Just like before, nous is our subject pronoun. That's telling us who is doing the activity of dressing ourselves. And our entire verb is all three words. The reflexive pronoun is considered part of the verb. So the reflexive pronoun plus the auxiliary verb plus the past participle all form the entire reflexive passé composé verb. We have to have all three together. If we compare the two, we can see that it's the exact same concept. All we did was we added a reflexive pronoun, which is all reflexive verbs are. They're the exact same as regular verbs, just plus a reflexive pronoun. There's nothing extra about it. In fact, if we go a step further, this is the exact same thing we do in English. Whether you know it or not, we is still a subject pronoun. Have studied is still a composed verb, though in English they're often called compound verbs. Have is, believe it or not, still an auxiliary verb, and studied is a past participle. We do the exact same thing in English that we do in French. We just don't always know all the words for it in English. Question number 2. What is the verb of the following sentence? Il s'est levé à 6 heures. Watch out for that object, too. Now that we can identify verbs, let's find the parts of the verb in this sentence. Okay, so, tu t'es maquillée aujourd'hui? In our verb, we have to have our reflexive pronoun, our auxiliary verb, and our past participle. So, where are all three of those parts? All right, if we take a look at this reflexive verb, we can see, we kind of skipped over it a little bit earlier, we can see that there's an irregularity here. Remember we said that every single reflexive verb will always take être as its auxiliary verb. Sommes means we are. It's part of that verb être. Every single time we have a verb that takes être as its auxiliary verb in the passé composé, we must make our past participle agree with the subject. It agrees in both number and gender, the exact same way an adjective would. So, we had to add an S onto our past participle, because nous is discussing more than one person. There's no way to have a singular we. We, by definition, is at least two people. So therefore, we had to add an S onto it in order to show that it was being plural. If it was feminine, we would have added an E. So if we were a group of girls, we would have added an ES if we were all girls. Let's look at some more examples of this, and hopefully this will help make it super clear. If we look at elles se sont habillées, we still have our être being our auxiliary verb. That will actually never change. So when we write our past participle, we have to follow that line back all the way to the subject pronoun. Elle is of course feminine by definition, and it's also plural by definition. If we have they, meaning a group of girls, the only time we can use the subject pronoun is when we have more than one person and they're all girls. So therefore we have to make it feminine, add our E, and we have to make it plural and add our S. If we were talking about a group of guys, we would only have to add the S, because it would clearly be a masculine plural subject pronoun, and so therefore we don't need the feminizing E, we just need the plural S. If we had elle, one girl who was getting dressed or got dressed, well, now it's feminine because she's a girl, but it's no longer plural. We only have one girl. So we change our reflexive pronoun and our auxiliary verb to match, and all we add on to our past participle is the feminine e. There's no more s because we only have one girl. For particular subject pronouns, we have to be very careful and think about exactly who we're talking about. We can't just guess based off of the subject pronoun. If I'm talking directly to that girl from my last sentence, looking at elle s'est habillée, so I don't know, let's call her Susan. So now I'm talking directly to Susan. Susan is still a girl, even though I'm using the word to, you, because I'm speaking directly to Susan, but she's still a girl, so I still have to make sure that my past participle matches her actual real life gender. She is still a she, that makes her still feminine, so therefore we still need the e. But now I quit talking to Susan and I go talk to Bob. He doesn't have anything. He's not feminine, so he doesn't need an e. And Bob is not more than one person, so he doesn't need the s. The regular past participle will do just fine for him. Alright, so question 4 and 5. Conjugate the passé composé of each of the following verbs. Think about giving the correct reflexive pronoun, the correct auxiliary verb, and the correct past participle, including how to agree correctly, in order so that everything matches the subject pronoun. So for example, in number 4, where we have il and se coucher, how would you conjugate the reflexive pronoun to match il, or the auxiliary verb to match il, or the past participle out of coucher? How do we agree back with il? Then do the exact same thing again in number 5, but this time with elle and se déshabiller.